live. It will be put on YouTube soon after the meeting. We have visitors today. Albert has made his return to the Transport Delivery Committee after a long break, rather longer than ours, in a live way, in-person way. And we have some local press here, certainly from the Express and Star, and a general, I can't see who else might be behind the column, from the Express and Star. Yeah, okay. So welcome. And welcome all of you, whether you're online or whether you're here in person. Do we have apologies for absence?
No, Chair, I've not received any apologies.
I think Councillor Samira Akhtar may be joining us online when she comes to roost from work. Tim?
Councillor Adrian Andrew, as you know, he's had health problems recently.
Yeah. Okay, Adrian Andrew then. Are there any declarations of interest?
Chair, I'd like to make one. I'm a member of the National Pensions Convention Transport Working Group, and if there is any discussion about travel centre closures, the Pensions Convention has expressed its opposition to that, so I prefer not to take part in any debate on that when it comes around, or if it comes around.
Thank you. Chair's remarks. I think a lot of what's been happening recently we've already dealt with earlier, and we'll be picking up later on in the meeting. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Laura Schauf for being appointed as Managing Director.
Oh, Chief Executive.
Chief Executive. There's the interchanging of titles in the sector, isn't there? So Chief Executive of the Combined Authority, and is still with us here as Interim Director of Transport for the West Midlands. So well done and welcome both to your posts. I've got some bullet points here. We've picked up on the BSIP. The application went in on the 5th of November after a 1-week reception and extension. We bid for monies that we feel we need to transform bus services, and the bid is for over £6 million of government funding, £600 million of government funding from the £3 billion bus fund that the government announced a year or two ago. There'll be reform in ticketing for customers, and we've got a report on Swift later on in the agenda, and additional bus priority across our region, and a target of zero emission bus fleet by 2030. We're wanting to know later this year how successful we've been. We're competing against 75 other local transport authorities who were also invited to apply. Travel shop closures. They did close on the 29th of October, the 5 National Express travel centres. Staff have been out at bus stations, supporting customers to use the new ways of getting information and ticketing and sorting out ticket issues. I do think that there might be a bit of feedback on that later on the agenda as to how people are coping, and how Transport for the West Midlands staff are trying to compensate for the absence of those services at the bus stations and on Corporation Street in Birmingham. But staff from Transport for the West Midlands are permanently based in the bus stations to support people. There have been some discussions with the Transport Department for Transport last week when the business case for the Zero Emission Bus Regional Area Fund was resubmitted. They've asked to that it be scaled down from 224 hydrogen buses to 124 hydrogen buses. I don't know what the rationale is behind that. And that includes the 24 articulated buses for Sprint. So there'll be 100 double deckers plus the 24 articulated Sprint buses. And we're waiting to hear about that soon, but I would have thought if they've suggested that it be scaled down in that way, then that's round about what they're inclined to, I hope anyway, at least, what they're inclined to grant for us. Okay. There's always risks there, but we wait in optimism on the outcome of that. Thank you. Shall we turn now to item 4, the minutes from the 13th of September? Are they a correct impression, they're called? Well,
Thank you, Madam Chair. You got me down as absent on that meeting on the 13th of September. I was here, but I was joined you virtually. I was away on holiday.
right, okay.
Councillor Parker.
Okay, we'll put them right. Any other comments about the accuracy?
No, Madam Chairman, just to mention the fact that on page 2, I did get a report a couple of days ago as regards to a report on the technical situation as referred to in the report.
Okay, good. I got a tick by that one under matters arising. So thanks for answering that question. I did wonder whether you'd had the feedback you requested. I think one or two other points. Right, we were expecting at the bottom of page 5 that a note from the Safer Travel team would be shared with the committee, and that's about cannabis on board buses. Tim, is it in relation to that?
No, it's another matter arising.
All right, well, I'll take you when we've sorted this one out. Councillor Jan asked about that. Has it been circulated? I don't remember it. Cannabis on buses?
I haven't seen the actual report, but I would just double check because we did
Yeah.
talk about the action and colleagues about putting something together. So I'll just double check that one.
That might be something that could go to the Safer Travel member engagement group as well, for their attention, I would say. Do we, this is on page 6 now, halfway down, just as a point, for information, do we know who was actually taken on or been granted the Commonwealth Games contract for bus services?
We have, the contract has now been signed, but I don't think it's yet public.
Okay.
It will be announced shortly.
Okay, thank you. And
Madam Chairman, before you move on, could I just comment on page 5? Just to highlight the fact that I do now receive the bus changes on a weekly basis, which I wasn't receiving before, and I'm most grateful that's been able to be put into place.
good. And I think, gosh, I think it was at the Bus Champions meeting. I asked that perhaps there should be just some more information by each change, just giving a few more details about why. We understand that they change for school holidays and so on, but if there is an issue with access on part of a route, meaning that the route has to be changed, we need to know what it is. And if so, perhaps you could do something about it so that people who live on a heavily parked road don't suddenly lose their service because of a lack of parking enforcement, or perhaps the need for more traffic regulation orders in that road. Okay. Now, Celia asked at the bottom of page 6 for an update on the branding of bus stops. We did have some facts and figures, didn't we, as to how many had been rebranded. Was that forthcoming? Perhaps.
So, Chair, these actions have been noted, and if they've not been received yet, they'll be chased.
Okay, thank you.
They're sent to members in due course.
Right, okay. Are there any other matters? Sorry, Tim.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Grinsall raised the issue of parking at Alton Station, and I understand that Pete is looking into it.
Yes, it going to appear in, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Huxtable. Yeah, just as a follow-on to that, we have the suggestions that were made by Councillor Grinsell were indeed followed up. The teams from Transport West Midlands undertook a site visit. We've now met with Solihull. Solihull are drawing up proposals for schemes to be evaluated and costed, and in terms of value for money and outputs, but they are being progressed. And as soon as we have the schemes back from Solihull, we'll report back further.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if Councillor Grinsell would like to comment.
Oh, there he is.
Yes.
Right, Bob.
Thank you, Kath. Yeah, thank you for that update. That's useful. If there's any delay from our highways department, will someone let me know and I'll do the proverbial.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll be in touch with Andy Thrupp, who's the lead officer on this, and mention that directly to him to communicate with you so he knows what the timescales are from Solihull and who is dealing with it within the council.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Any other matters arising? Okay. Let's move on then to the forward plan. It's item 6. I would like to insert, probably via the next agenda briefing, an item on freight into the forward programme into next year, because we did say after our first focus on it that we would look at it on an annual basis, and I think there's something coming through in the Crust Fund, as we call it, which is very pertinent to doing something about decarbonising and cleaning up freight movements. Any other comments, Tim?
Well, on that specific issue, Chair, could we have a specific focus on rail freight? Because I think that gives us the biggest opportunity to decarbonise freight travel. Yeah. Because with the potential HS2 in particular gives us the additional capacity created on the classic network could well be used for a lot of rail freight and taking it off our roads and onto the rails. And I think that would be particularly welcomed by all those involved. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So we'll get that in early in the new year. Robert?
Thank you. I was going to ask if we could get onto a future agenda, maybe either February or the March one, a substantive update report on the progress with the University in Peribah train station work. Obviously conscious when you look at one of the reports we've got coming up in a future item, the Edgbaston station improvements are down as being August. They're like to be completed as an amber. And I know from when we had the previous briefing on these, there's really tight timescales for both of these actually getting done in time for the game. So I think it's important that we've got to focus on that and an update here so we know where we are with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Or we could have it as a briefing as well, or instead of. So we'll certainly take that on in the new year. Okay, let us move on then. Item 7. Capital Programme Monitoring Delivery Report. Pervez, do you want to lead off on this, please?
Yes, Madam Chairman, thank you. Madam Chairman, thank you very much. I would like to present to the committee the Capital Programme Delivery Monitoring Report. The committee is recommended to note achievements since the June meeting of the Transport Delivery Committee. Also to note the progress of deliverables and outturn of the 2021-22 capital programme. To note where indicated any variations from the baseline programme. Madam Chairman, positive progress has continued with the ongoing delivery of capital programme. The following achievements have been completed during September and October. Number 1, Dudley Interchange work to procure contractors through open tender exercise are now complete, with activities being completed to award contract. Number 2, University Station, 2 major milestones were delivered. Number 1, the canal footbridge and rail link bridge was successfully installed. Number 2, legal agreements for canal footbridge are complete. Madam Chairman, Caribou rail station and bus interchange, positive progress in construction with all major steelwork, lift shops and stairs now installed. Work commenced on the bus interchange north entrance. West Midland cycle hire scheme now rolled out across all 7 local authorities with 1,216 has of 1st October 2021 bikes currently out on street. Digital panel rollout, clear channel contract negotiations are now complete and include an additional 110 digital panels across the transport for West Midland estate over the remainder of the contract. The committee should note the following exception during the reporting period. University Station, the scheme has been re-baselined, which shows an improvement in the opening date. And with that, I hand over to Sandeep if he wants to add something extra. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Nothing more to add. As always, Councillor Akhtar does a very good job of picking out all the key points. The only thing that I will add, and happy to take any questions later on, is in relation to the cycle hire scheme. So at the moment, the fleet is made up of the existing pedal bikes. Over the coming weeks, we will see the introduction of e-bikes as well, which will further enhance the offer to the travelling public. So that's the next sort of iteration of that scheme. But happy to take any questions or comments.
David.
Yes, very quickly, Madam Chairman, coming back to the question about the bicycles, out of the 1,216 we've got, are they being used? Because every time I pass by, they seem to be, the racks always fill, but no box seem to be used. And I wondered how popular the scheme was. And secondly, are we getting any problems with these bikes not being returned? And is it, and stuff like that. So is it a successful scheme, or how would you describe it as being?
A very good question, Councillor. So the scheme has been successful. We're still in the first few months of it operating fully. So we're still rebalancing the fleet in terms of where the bikes are. In terms of the docking stations, one of the things that we're really keen to see is make sure there is bike availability. So when the docks are full, it's not always because they're not being used, but we have the service provider actually going and rebalancing the bikes around to make sure there is always good availability across the network. What we have is good usage levels across the conurbation. Obviously some places are quieter than others, but we're seeing really good usage in Coventry and in Birmingham. What we're also seeing is getting a better understanding of when the bikes are popular. So they seem to be more popular in the afternoon and into the evening. So again, that's a good indication of how they're being used. I have asked that all members of TDC get the dashboards. So you will get the weekly dashboards for the usage, so that will give you all the insights into how they're being used, when they're being used across the entire conurbation. If that hasn't happened, I do apologise, but I'll make sure that all members of TDC get those. If they clog up your inbox, do feel free to delete them, but there's some really useful information about the overall usage. On the second question about bikes not being returned, we have hardly any issues with bikes not being returned. The biggest challenge that we had originally were bikes not being put back into the docking station, but there is a penalty if people don't replace them within 5 meters of the dock. They're geofenced. So if they don't do that, they get charged a penalty, but that's led to a good behaviour where bikes are being returned into the docks. I'm only aware of one bike that had gone missing altogether, but they're all fitted with GPS trackers, so they can be located very quickly and returned back to the service provider.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, can I just have a quick supplementary?
Yeah.
If we've got sites where they're not being used, we will really look at relocating those sites so that they will come into use, because sometimes people are not aware where they are and not always obvious where they are. And we either need to advertise the fact where they are, the location, or if they're not popular in that location, to relocate them.
Absolutely, that's exactly the work that will be going on now. We've got some good baseline data on usage levels, where the sites are popular, where the usage is slightly lower. We can think about rebalancing and thinking about where do we actually want to shift some of the docks to. But what we don't want to move away from is making sure that we've got a regional offer. We do want the bikes to be in each one of the boroughs, but making sure they're in the right locations to maximise that usage. At the end of the day, it's a commercial model. It needs to generate the revenue for it to work well.
Thank you.
We've got Tim next. Let's see.
Thank you very much, Chair. Item 5 on the dashboard, University Station. And it says in the paragraph, the last couple of sentences, alongside this, additional scope for the project has been identified by partners and will allow for an enhanced facility to be delivered. Further details will be contained in the financial monitoring report of the WMCA board on the 19th of November 2021. Given that here we are on the 14th of December, always the 15th, it doesn't matter, that the CA board document should now be public. Could we have some further details on this enhanced facility that's going to be delivered? And again, my normal caution is that we've got the baseline completion date for August 2022, i.e. after the Commonwealth Games have finished. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. So I'll start with the baseline dates. The baseline date has been moving. There's been further work done with the contractor around accelerating that. Now that is the sort of the official entry into service date, as it says in the update itself. They're also reviewing the games configuration states to ensure that we've got the facility in time for the Commonwealth Games. In terms of the enhanced scope and the information around that, this really relates to additional requirements in terms of basically hostile threat mitigation measures to the actual station building itself, which has led to some additional scope changes. And this is largely because the station has gone from being a certain classification of station to a much larger facility, which then needs to have a different level of threat mitigation measures put within that building. So that's some of the reasons around the scope changes, and that is what will lead to an enhanced facility. There's already some other aspects around it where we are working with the NHS about providing some additional facilities within the station building itself. And again, those have been captured as part of that slight increase in scope changes. The details will be within the financial report. Kate, I think, has that gone? That should be public now.
It has, yeah.
But in terms of those measures, there's no fundamental change to what is being delivered. And for those of you who go past the station will see the great progress that's being made. But this is about enhancing the facility that's there and the right opportunity to do that while the works are ongoing, rather than having to come back and do that at a later point in time.
Supplementary, if I may. In terms of this enhanced facility and the changes, which I very much welcome, I'm assuming we're keeping the Edgbaston ward councillors involved and up to date with those.
Absolutely, councillor. So the engagement should be ongoing with the team in terms of making sure any communications are going out there. Like I said, there is no material change to the way that the building looks or the actual design. It's just the additional enhancements that we are seeking to improve at this point in time.
Thanks. Okay. Any questions on this report? Oh, Sarah, of course, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Very simple question. You mentioned about the fine if the cycle not returned on time. What do you get for the fine? Can you just tell us the rate of the fine?
Sure. Yeah. So it's not so much if the bike isn't returned on time, because it's based on the number of minutes that you use. The penalty is applied if the bike is not returned to the docking station or within a certain area outside the docking station. If it's not within the 5 metre radius around the docking station, it's a £10 penalty, because it does mean that an operative has to go and collect those bikes and put them back into the stand. But we have been communicating that to all users as well, that if the bike is not returned into the stands or within a certain location, this is the penalty that will be applied to their account.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. You want to add something?
Just quickly, Chair. I mean, I totally back what Sandeep is saying, and he's absolutely right that in Coventry, there are a lot of people using bikes, but there is a complaint, and Sandeep is taking very seriously. It looks very, very awkward and doesn't look neat when people just leave it next to the docking station, bike lying on the floor. So I'm, already Sandeep is on top of that. I want to assure my colleagues. Thank you.
If I may, Chair, just to come back in on that point, it's something that we've been working on as well. And at the last meeting, I did mention that there were 24 additional docking stations that were being procured at the moment. And that is exactly to alleviate that issue where there are some docking stations which are very popular and there isn't enough room for bikes. And in those locations, we will be providing extra docks so that there is always that space for those additional bikes to go into rather than being left on the pavement nearby.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for that, Sandeep and Pervez. And Kate is coming up now with item 8, financial monitoring report.
That's me again.
Yes, indeed.
Kate is always very helpful. Thank you. Madam Chairman, obviously this is the financial monitoring report, reporting year-to-date income and expenditure up to 30th September 2021. As to revenue budget, the year-to-date revenue position to 30th September 2021 reflects an overall favourable position of £1.9 million. The primary driver of this continues to be savings in the concession budget due to the continued impact of the pandemic, being both reduced service and patronage. There have also been no fare increases. Other savings are largely as reported in previous months. The savings are offset by lower than budgeted use of reserves year to date to support the overall budget, as these have not yet been required. These year-to-date savings are expected to offset budgeted support to operators to deal with the impact of COVID-19, which has been built into the forecast. Madam Chairman, as to capital expenditure, overall year-to-date capital expenditure to the end of September 2021 is £121.9 million, which is £47.6 million behind year-to-date budget of £169.5 million. The key variances are in the investment program portfolio, which is £31.5 million, and Commonwealth Games program, which is £7 million. The key drivers for this investment program variations are Westbury to Brierley Hill Metro Extension, which is £8.9 million favourable due to rescheduling of utilities work. Birmingham East Side Metro Extension, which is £9 million favourable due to rescheduling of project programme and payment profiles for utilities diversion. Commonwealth Games programme includes all the schemes scheduled to be delivered in advance of the Games in July and August 2022. At the end of September, actual costs totaled £58 million. The main driver of the year-to-date underspent is the sprint programs, which are £40.7 million behind year-to-date budget. Both programs are now seeing accelerated work with no expected impact on completion dates. This underspend is offset by accelerated drawdown of funding for the Alexander Stadium redevelopment. Other major schemes expenditure at the end of September was £4.8 million below budget. The main variance relates to the Cross City Bus City Centre package. As to grants to local authorities, expenditure at the end of July was £2.7 million below budget. This variance relates to the B4106 Spun and Works, where the acquisition of properties has been rephased into later in this financial year. As to minor works programme spend is £1.8 million below budget year to date, primarily driven splice change delay affecting the timing of work at bus station and parks and rides. And with that, over to Kate. Thank you.
Thank you. No, nothing further to add to that, but we're happy to take any questions.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions? Join.
I've got my hand up.
You know, I'm ever so sorry, Bob. Go on, you've got the floor now.
No, I know it's difficult. It's a difficult set of circumstances for you, so probably best if I just shout up if I want to say something. Thank you.
Don't.
It's a good, clear, and gives us good financial information. But it's just a comment, really, that it does demonstrate just how little capital investment is happening in the borough of Solihull currently. So I sincerely hope we can see, I'm sure Councillor Parker would agree with me, that maybe we could look at redressing that situation. Thank you.
Any comments on that? You would, yeah. To look at what share of the population you might make up in the West Midlands, that's one factor.
Madam Chairman, let me say that there is going to be a massive investment as far as metro is concerned. Once we reach airport, we will go all the way to Solihull.
Will it come back?
And don't forget, Coventry isn't even mentioned as far as metro is concerned. So we are your next neighbours, so hopefully.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, you've got the links there. Yes.
I was going to bring up a point under the Metro report, but I'll leave it till then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you, Kate and Pervez. Let us move on to Metro Operations Monitoring Report. Now, first of all, we'll deal with the contents of the report as an operational monitoring report as to how the Metro has been faring in the recent period. We'll take questions and comments on that to begin with. We'll then move over to do what I think people who may be tuning in or watching the YouTube of this meeting will be wanting to know more about, and that's about the suspension. But first of all, let's deal with the report itself.
I'll introduce it.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's all right. I'm
sorry.
just chairing Meg. It's no big deal, you know.
I'm just keeping my eye open for Bob there.
Yeah. So, it's there as set out. I'm a graduate of history, so. Any comments? I know that Councillor Burden and Channel Line for one, so I can't take you in turn. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on. Chris.
Okay, first. So I've got a question. Oh, can you turn your mics off so I can get a mic? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'm running ahead of myself. Anne, did you want to introduce the report, please?
Oh, well, Sophie would have done.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I'll take you, gentlemen.
Switch on.
I'm going to make an assumption that you've all read the report. Obviously, Sophie is rather busy at the moment, so she's not able to join us. So in terms of the performance, it sets out how the Metro line has been taking customers on board. We've been increasing in patronage throughout the last few months as well. So I'm just going to take the report as read and obviously deal with the help of Pete, any questions.
Councillor Burden.
Thank you. I do have a question on the report. It's actually on the zonal fare structures, 8.1, page 34 in the agenda pack. We keep saying that we want a London-style transport system. Sure, I agree with you. But that doesn't mean importing the very, very worst parts of the London transport system. Zonal fare systems are confusing for the public, they don't work, and directly exacerbate all of the problems that you're claiming in this report that you're seeking to correct. I mean, research into this would have discovered this, in my opinion. I genuinely can't believe that internal teams haven't recommended a different approach to this. Effective systems for metro and things like this are flat fares, distance-based fares that are irrelevant to zones, or maybe short hops that are tied to, you know, logical geographical areas. But this zonal system isn't doing that. It's not addressing those problems. If we just look at it, I've got the proposed one here. I hope that proposed one's up to date. It's the latest one I can find. We've got central Birmingham as zone 1, which in my opinion doesn't make any sense considering the geographical location of the system, in which West Bromwich is the centre of the system and is going to continue to be the centre of the system because of the Briley Hill extension and the speculative New Cross Hospital extension. West Bromwich is always going to be in the middle. We've also got this strange system where Wolverhampton is cleft from Bilston. The central Birmingham city core is split up at the library inexplicably, and Brindley Place isn't in central Birmingham. But then you can go all the way from the Jewellery Quarter to Canal Street, which is a massive distance. But you can't travel within Wolverhampton within one zone. That doesn't make much sense. There's some other problems that actually I think are really worrying for legibility to the public. Wolverhampton and Dudley are put into zone 4. And there's only 3 stops in zone 4 in Wolverhampton, 3 stops in Dudley. But when it comes to rail zoning, they're in zone 5. So how are the public meant to understand the zonal system when they've got a zone 5 on rail and a zone 4 on metro? It doesn't make much sense. And then it adds confusing barriers to transport. So I have 3 specific questions. Could the officers enlighten me as to how this was decided, why it was decided, and who was the recommending body that suggested that this zonal system go ahead? And then, if I could, it might not be my place, but I've got to do it, could I urge the officers to rethink this approach? Because I genuinely don't think it works. I think speaking to transport experts, they'd agree. Look at the Paris Metro, look at the Berlin Underground, look at Frankfurt, look at the London Hopper, actually, for a really great example of how this works in practice.
I feel a visit coming on to have a look at these facilities. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. All very well made points. I think, firstly, I won't pretend to be the expert in this field. However, what I would say to you is 2 or 3 things in response to that. Firstly, we have a report coming up later on in with regards to Swift and ticketing, and actually looking more forward thinking about where this is going. And actually, some of those points that you raise are as much about the future element of an integrated ticketing proposal as they are just for the metro in isolation, and that's something that I think we could, should, and will happily not only take you through, but also maybe helpful for a wider briefing note for everybody to A, review, and B, support the discussions around that and those challenges. I think with regards to legibility as well, that's also something that's absolutely fundamental to the outcomes of this and what we are looking. So when we talked about the BSIP earlier on, for example, that's looking at a reform of the ticketing and an area-based system. Rail is looking at the same, and what is really important, how do we bring those things together? So I think maybe we could just suggest that we pick up that question briefly through the SWIFT, but also take an action to come back to fundamentally answer your question with a briefing note, if that's okay.
And could that briefing note go to us all?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Chris?
Brief supplementary, sorry. While we've got it on record, could I highly recommend, because I'm the member for Wolverhampton, could we highly have a look at integrating Bilston into the same zone as Wolverhampton? Because if you speak to people from the Metro, we know that Bilston to Wolverhampton, Wolverhampton to Bilston, it's a huge route, huge amounts of patronage. Having them in a single zone is the logical thing to do to save people money, actually, in vulnerable parts of the city.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman. Chairman. Yes, I've got him down.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of people watching us online, I'm Councillor Chairman Lal, Birmingham City Council. My question is on the 8.3.1 recruitment. What I would like to know, what the current staffing situation at the moment? We know that the staffing issue with the driver shortage on the buses and on the trains. Have you got full drivers on the current level, and how can we make certain that once all the metro in the extended lines are operational, that we will have the full staff to run them?
Peter, probably come in on this as well, but obviously there is a recruitment drive within MML to make sure that they've got all the available sources, not just drivers, but also all the mechanics and other sort of support that happens around the entire operation. We have been working with the Combined Authorities skills team as well, and we've been working really hard on schemes like Kickstart, where we're trying to get people who've got long-term unemployment as well into some of those jobs that are coming up through MML. Okay.
So what the current situation at the moment? Have we got all?
And just in terms of the current situation, so we have a full complement of staff available. Obviously, we have this period of time now that we're speaking about, but there is no suggestion that we will have any problems associated with that once we get to return Metro to service. And I think, but it is a really important point because we've seen challenges not just within our sector, but right across industries. And we've seen this in lorry driving and the HGV industries. We've seen it with PCV. So actually looking at the pipeline of recruitment and training and making sure that we have adequate support in that is a continued pivotal thing. And please don't assume because the metros aren't there that activity isn't still going on, because it is.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. On point 5, it refers to the conductor. If you remember a few meetings ago, I raised the question about using this system and no conductor on board. It's very pleasing to see that 99% now have got conductors on board. The other point I raised at the same time was the ticket machines they use tending to run out of power, and it puts them in a bit of a difficult situation of issuing tickets. Has that been resolved as well?
I think that's probably one that we'll need to take away and come back to you on that question. I know there has been an issue with some of the ticketing machines. Yeah, so let us come back to you and just answer that specific question.
And Madam Chairman, supplementary, I fully agree with Councillor Burden with the comments he made about the zoning. He's got my 100% support on that.
Thank you. Any other questions on this report? Zia.
It's a very tiny one. Yeah, it is about the penalty fare consultation. I noted that it is 19th would be closing about the £100 and £40. So when it was started, the starting date, so in a month or 6 weeks, when it was starting date of the consultation. Thank you.
We'll have to check in with Sophie, who was going to present that to you in terms of starting date, and confirm that back to you, Councillor.
Okay. Any further comments or questions on the report? Okay. Well, thank you for that. We'll move into sort of part B of the question of Metro while we're on the subject. Certainly we've heard about its successes and the way in which the service has come through the pandemic, but you now have quite a different, more serious issue on our hands, and that is its suspension. And I think it behoves us to discuss this while we're in public and people can tune in and find out more about the suspension, what it means, the impact it will have on them, and how long, of course, it might go on for. Do you want to introduce this, Richard?
Not at all. I thought the idea was that
switch the left hand.
Okay.
I'll pass on to Anshaw.
Give us a lead into this, and then we can take our questions.
Okay, so obviously the decision was taken by the operator late on Friday to suspend services on Saturday. Initially, this will be for a period of about 4 weeks, and this is for safety concerns for people who are using the trams and also for the operator themselves as well. They are the authority that makes that decision. Our first focus has been about supporting the customers that use Metro and making sure that we've got information out about what is happening and how long it is likely to be, and then also ensuring that they have access to other forms of public transport so they can continue to make their journeys around that as well. We've got acceptance for tickets on our rail operators and acceptance for tickets on our bus operators as well. We're also working through a multimodal, multi-agency response coordinated by our Director of Network Resilience and supported by the rest of TfWM and our colleagues over at Midland Metro Limited as well. And we're making sure that through all of our customer information, we're providing updates about what is happening and how it might affect their journeys, what those alternatives are as well, and keeping people up to date. We are currently working through the situation in terms of planning the return to service, dealing with the safety concerns that we've got as well, and we're focused on that this week so that we can come back at a future date and give more certainty about when the tram will start to operate again. I think that's probably as much as I can say for now, but we will be making sure that our communications are really clear when we have a clear date about those operations coming back into service, what those safety concerns are and how we're dealing with those, and then also making sure that all of our customers have got all the right level of support that they need to continue to go about their daily business. We know that this is really disappointing and this decision has not been taken lightly. This is first and foremost about safety and that must be our first consideration. The team at TfWM and Midland Metro Limited, along with all of our operators, are working really hard to make sure that we've got a robust mitigation plan in place and we're keeping people moving. I think that's probably as much as I'll say.
Okay, thank you. Now, I've actually noticed Linda's hand up there in the top corner of our screen. As I troll for any signs of comments. Linda.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, I'm just glad to say that our rigorous checks have shown this up because, as has been said, safety is our first priority. What I'd like to be assured of now is that those rigorous checks will be maintained, even enhanced, and won't concentrate on any particular issue, but will be maintained as a whole. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're in the process of checking all of our trams, working with various colleagues and also with our independent regulators as well. You can be rest assured that they are rigorous. We've got some additional support from the organisations that have that particular expertise as well. And we are going through all of those checks and making sure that before those trams come back into service, that they are safe to operate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Chairman and Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I find the situation we find ourselves, I mean, it's our office fault. It's not the MML fault, but I find it's unacceptable, it's diabolical. That we knew this the cracks appearing in June, and we had waited till now to suspend a service. To me, I think it is the manufacturer or supply of these trams, so we have to account that we should have had some contingency measures in place for such eventuality. The manufacturer should have some contingency measures in this eventuality. We should not be suspended service. We should have had the manufacturer giving us, the supplier giving us spare trams to run the keep the service running while the current fleet is taken out for repairs. So it's more time somebody got to hold the supplier or the manufacturer to account and get them to cough up, pay up for replacement trams, rather than inconveniencing hundreds of thousands of our travellers daily. And coming to Christmas time, peak travelling time, we want people, public, to ditch their cars, use public transport. This is a really good way of promoting public transport. If we got measures in place, they can use the tickets on buses or trains, but they are already struggling. Our trains are already starting packed. They can't take any more passengers. They got driver problems. They're done already on time at the moment. They can't go with the travelling passengers. Our buses are not that reliable. So this is not acceptable. Could we please get back to the manufacturers to get replacement trams, get a service up and running again, please? Thank you.
So I agree with you that the tram network is a really important part of our public transport system, as a clean public transport system as well, and that is why it is our priority to make sure that we have a safe operating service as soon as possible. But we must go through all of those safety checks first. We are working really hard, not just as an organisation, as I say, we've got other organisations that are working with us to go through those rigorous checks and making sure that we're carrying out a full repair programme in order to bring those trams back into service.
Okay. Chris.
Hi there, thank you. For the benefit of the people watching, the people who are in the sort of gallery, I understand that some of this is commercially sensitive, so please indicate if I've asked a commercially sensitive programme, because everyone understands that obviously we won't say that to the press and public. I suppose I've got 3 questions. Could you just, for the benefit of the people watching, reiterate what the damage is and where the damage is and how these cracks have occurred? That would be the first question. My second question is sort of, these trams have been retrofitted with battery technology. Now that's a political choice to avoid catenary run-in and overhead lines. Has the weight of these battery packs possibly contributed to the load-bearing capacity of the tram and perhaps contributed to the cracking? And we've just taken delivery of 3rd generation trams. Now, the reason why I ask about the retrofitting is because these 3rd generation trams have been designed to have the battery packs on them. That is within their fundamental spec. Has the rest of the spec been updated with these 3rd generation trams to ensure safe running? That's actually value for money for the taxpayer as well, because people are going to be sitting at home thinking, hang on, trams ain't cheap. How come they're breaking already? You wouldn't expect a car to only last this long. How could a tram that costs this much money suddenly have a hole in it? So are we completely confident these 3rd generation trams that we're paying, frankly, an immense amount of money for, are they up to spec? Are they up to ability to cope?
As you've mentioned, we've got a number of cracks that are on the tram. So yes, we can confirm where those are, and we're working with the manufacturer to sort of resolve all of those as well. You've asked a question about the battery retrofit. That's gone through a process of design, and they've been introduced as part of that as well. I won't make any more comments about that. And then in terms of the 3rd generation trams, which we've had delivery of but are not yet in service, they are a different specification, as you've highlighted as well. They've been designed with the battery packs in there too, and they're also a different body specification as well. And we've gone through a robust procurement process and also all the technical checks in terms of what the specification is, and they will still go through that assurance in terms of entry into service as well, being checked rigorously, not just by colleagues in MML, but also the independent assessors as well.
Supplementary, Chair, if possible.
Celia. Oh, supplementary, yeah.
Supplementary. Sorry. Is there any chance of? I understand that entering trams into service is a very, very, very rigorous process. We don't want to rush safety. As Linda said, safety is paramount. As you said, safety is paramount. These new trams that we've taken delivery of, is there any way that their entrance to service can be expedited? As we know these new trams aren't damaged, we know that they're acceptable. Can they be entered into service, perhaps in a way that we can start to address some of these issues as soon as possible? Because this is the lifeline. I don't represent Bilston, but I represent Wolverhampton, and Bilston needs these online as soon as possible.
As you can appreciate, entry into service for those new trams is on our top of our to-do list as well, to support the existing fleet, and we're working that programme up. Obviously, our main focus for this weekend has been supporting all of our customers and the mitigation response around that. Our focus this week is now returning to getting the fleet up and running, including accelerating, but with all the right safety checks in place, the 3rd generation trams coming into use.
There are 8 of them, aren't there? I understand that we're ready at the depot to be used. Okay, thank you. Celia.
Hi, thank you for that report. Look, we understand there are safety concerns, and you guys, we are trying to deal with this. And I know that our resilience team are doing their best as well to mitigate the dire situation that we find ourselves in. But I'll be wasting my space on the Transport Delivery Committee if I fail to share with you the frustrations, not just the frustrations of people of Wolverhampton, but frustrations of people across the West Midlands Combined Authority that use the tram. I want to re-echo some of the sentiments, the public sentiments, which are, I'm actually quoting some of the things I read online. The public have described this situation as a complete shambles. Some have said, oh, well, let me just get back into my car again. Some have gone as far as restating our worst fears, which is never rely on public transport. You will agree with me, or I hope you do agree with me, that this is a sad, sad situation, especially as we are in Christmas time. And as a football fan, actually, we are in full football season with the Premiership games going on, the EFL competition and what have you. We already have, our services already buckle during football weekends, because I do get a lot of complaints coming through on how the trams are overcrowded, the windows aren't open. So I'm just thinking, we're going even further back. We had people complaining already they can't even breathe in the tram. And now it seems like they will end up actually traveling on the camel's back, the rate at which we're going. About 20,000 individual journeys, 20,000 individual journeys a day will be disrupted. Times that by 7, that's about 140,000 individual journeys. Multiply that by a month, which is the estimation you're giving to us for the trams to be back on the usage. So if you multiply that, if my maths is correct, we're talking about above 500,000 individual journeys to be disrupted around Christmas, around football season, like I said. Come on, it's unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. We're just coming out from a pandemic. Whoever spotted the cracks or whatever should have spotted this when we had less people on the trams and then fixed this. Is there a system there? Are we going to have a system going forward that we are on top of our games? On top of our game, we can't have all our work being undone. People like me are on the street day in, day out, convincing people that public transport is the new model. That's how we need to travel. But then when these things happen, it just rolls back on the progresses we've made. So just saying safety measures is not good enough. Surely something has to be done. 1 month of no tram in West Midlands is completely unacceptable.
So we've not taken this decision lightly. We know the number of people that are affected by this decision, and we've worked really hard to make sure that there are other choices available, working with our operators, our bus operators and our train operators as well, so that we can provide as little disruption as possible. Obviously, we are here as promoters of public transport as well, and clean public transport, which the tram is. As I said, we didn't take this decision lightly with Midland Metro Limited, but you must accept that safety comes first. We would not want anything that would happen to any of our customers or to any of our staff whilst we do this. And we are working on the programme to look at how we can accelerate, as we've just heard the question about acceleration of those new trams into service and the repair programme on the existing trams as well. As we stand on this date, as it's just happened over this weekend, we will have more information in due course about what that programme will look like. And we're giving you an estimate about what we think the service disruption will be. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, sorry, Maureen, John Millers, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, how can these cracks be avoided in the future so the same concern does not occur, the same concerns do not occur again? So that moving forward. And second question will be, will you consider to reduce costs for trams to help individuals, commuters use more transport trams, especially families with that struggle with finances or because of the pandemic or are unemployed and are struggling with their finances? And we do know public transport can add up, especially families are trying to commute and travel by public transport. Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously we're working with all of those technical teams in terms of assessing cracks and making sure that we've got the right solution in place as well. In terms of reducing costs for trams, obviously at the moment we've got the ticket acceptance on the other public transport options, and we are looking through and working through that. What does it mean in terms of any sort of additional savings? We've got some information for customers about refunds on direct debits or pausing direct debits as well whilst the tram is not operating as part of that, and we're just working through some of that detail, so we will have that in due course. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I totally agree with the officers that safety of passenger, their safety, their security is paramount. But please, I would urge them, as they already stated and they are doing, that multimodal and multi-agency response is needed. Alternative must be fully exploited, which they are doing. But one has to emphasize that. But Madam Chairman, this is a very clear demonstration to us that our leadership was wrong to destroy and decimate manufacturing in our country. And I would urge all of us that whatever capacity, we need to ask our, leadership at the highest level, please. We want to build, trains in our country, metros, in our country. We want to buy British. We want to invest in our country. So I would urge every one of us, please, we have to take this case at the highest level, that this is not tolerable situation. We cannot just, buy stuff from foreign countries. I mean, yes, we're having problems here, but these are the very trains now I understand. In Australia, in Sydney, they're having problems. So it's not just in our country. So I would urge, our colleagues in opposition also that please, Metro Mayor needs to come into action in this process and see if he can help us in that regard. Thank you.
Tim.
That's a very apt point, because I was going to mention the Metro Mayor's transport vision, and indeed transport vision for the Metro network that he launched in February 2020, and I was pleased to be at that launch along with members of the press. And of course, by creating a metro network across the whole of the West Midlands, we can start to create the market that makes it viable for companies to establish manufacturing, because they're not going to establish manufacturing for just one particular line or one particular metro area. But if we're going to do a whole network and going to be joined by metro mayors across the country, we actually create the market for companies to want to invest in the UK. And of course, the flexibility that gives us, especially now that we're allowed to, we're not part of the EU procurement rules any longer, and can afford to look at state subsidies for such a network, gives us a massive opportunity. So I'd like to thank Councillor Perez for mentioning that and talking about the Mayor's Metro network and vision for the next 40, 50 years, if I remember the launch correctly. So thank you very much, Chair.
We had a number of discussions about why we were buying trams from Spain at the time, and people perhaps had higher hopes than were actually viable of Bombardier being able to manufacture them. And I think the key then was that if a company is going to start changing the type of product or track-based public transport vehicle that it makes, and it's got to be absolutely sure that there's a market for it. And so, yes, I think with more metropolitan areas looking at the tram, then this could well be the very opportunity for a company like Bombardier, based in Wales, I believe, to take it on and to make something of it. Is it Wales?
I think it's Derby.
Derby. Oh, they've got a couple of. I thought they had a couple of wings bases. Anyway, Chris.
Hello, sorry. This is sort of coming from my personal life. I'm a bit of a tram hobbyist. I'm a bit of a tram and train nerd in my personal life. But if you look at tram systems, not just in the UK, but around the world, Nottingham's our closest partner that does this. But if you look at Mainz, Frankfurt, most of the German tram systems, it's actually highly unusual to see a tram system with an entirely captive fleet of just one brand of tram. That's actually a really unusual format for a tram system. They tend to have different models from different brands. If that had been the situation here, we would still have half a fleet in operation. Would it be in future, are we putting all of our eggs in one basket by committing to a single brand? Whereas if there becomes a flaw with that model, the entire system goes down. Or could we diversify our interest in future and source trams from different brands that requires similar maintenance? Eventually, we're going to have to open up a new maintenance depot. Perhaps we could look in future at having different trams from some different manufacturers, or to sort of diversify our risk. In all other fields, you don't, if you're an investment banker, you don't invest all in one thing just in case that industry collapses. Could we not take a similar approach in the West Midlands with trams?
That's a good question. I can't see why our procurement rules would prevent that, and so a sensible suggestion for the future.
Just quickly, Chair. I'm sorry, I'll be very quick. I would like to ask Pete. So, would it be very light rail? The answer, you know, a lot of investment is coming. A lot of our manufacturing in Midlands are working on that.
Very light rail, yes.
I think the proposition for the very light rail is looking at proposals for a business case in its own right. I think the points that have been discussed, you know, I mean, obviously with those options, looking at different suppliers, fleets, they also come with risks, of course, because actually some of those fleets that have a more diversification of a supplier base quite are often a lot older. They're very established systems that have been running for many a decade, and also that sort of sometimes comes with all other risks about best value and costs and all those other things as well. But absolutely, very light rail could potentially is looking at its own business case as part of its own solution to support a specific need within the network. I don't necessarily see that would be a direct replacement for the issue we have in front of us. I think we need to resolve what we've got in front of us and get our fleet operating fully and comprehensively again.
Right, thank you. I think we'll finish on that section there. But what I would ask for is for maybe a weekly, perhaps even a few paragraphs, a progress report on what's happening out there on the network with the travelling public, just to keep us in the loop, knowing about the impact on the people we serve.
Yeah, we are monitoring daily, and in the same way that we did the weekly report for COVID and how the public transport system was taking people around, we will do similar in this situation as well.
Thank you. Thank you all. Let's move on to Swift Delivery Monitoring Report. Well, we'll go straight into Matt. Yeah.
Hi guys. Thank you, Chair. Let me just share my screen if you don't mind. It's more to guide me than anything else. Here we go. Okay, so I'm just gonna run you through the key highlights of this report. So the purpose is to update on the progress of the Swift programme, but also to give you a general overview on ticketing, as there's quite a lot going on in this space at the moment. I won't touch on all of these things in the tables, but clearly we'll be willing to answer any questions on the wider content of the note. But just to bring out a few things. So really pleased to have launched the Swift app. That's live now on Android and the App Store. It's actually been hugely popular. So over 22,000 downloads. That's without significant marketing. So really pleased to have got that out there. For the first time, we bring together all of the functions with information and ticketing into a single place. Before this, there was sort of a collection of apps, etc. So that's really been a step forward. Swift Go we finally got there. So I know sort of a lot of you guys have been around as we've been trying to work up how does the West Midlands deliver its Oyster card version, and Swift Go is that for us. So this gives you best value capping on the bus and tram. at the moment. So all the complexities of ticketing are in there. So the system knows if it's off peak, it knows what area you're in. It can essentially work out everything in the background to give you the best value. And what we really were pleased to have done in the summer is to not only do that for one day, but also 3 days in a week. So if like me, you are now, working in a hybrid sense, so sometimes in the office, sometimes at home, and you might not know week by week how many times you're in the office, Swift goes perfect for that. 1 week it will cap you at 3 days, another week it will be a couple of days, and then it will be a week, etc. So that we're really hoping that's going to have a major impact as people return from the pandemic. It also features heavily in our BSIP, so incentivizing people to take up Swift Go is a big part of that. And again, fingers crossed we get the funding to push that out there. Swift Parking, another big feature that we're pushing, so is taking Swift payments from just public transport, where we actually now know loads of information about 1 million people, 250,000 regular users. We know the services they're travelling on, etc. But we know nothing about those that don't use public transport. It's actually those that we need to influence. So Swift Parking is now live. We've got all of Dudley's car parks on Swift Parking. We've got half of Coventry's council operated car parks. The other half are coming in the next month. And we're really keen to work with the rest of you to get all of your car parks onto this as well. So what this does, it gives us the opportunity to encourage people to travel sustainably. So we capture them when they're parking. And if you park in one of our centres, every day or 3 days a week or whatever, we can be certain you're not a public transport user. And through deals that we set up with operators, we can give you huge discounts to try and convert you to become a public transport user. And even if you don't, from the council's perspective, we're not in this for profit, so we should be able to deliver this cheaper than your current providers of parking. And this will give you the data you need as well to manage your own parking networks. It's good for you too. The other thing in this space, which is really sort of neat in terms of technology, is we've opened up the Swift account so you can use your car number plate as a token. So if you drive into Longbridge Park and Ride, drive in, drive out, we charge you automatically, so don't worry about paying for your parking. Makes it really, really simple. So there's more to come here, but I think the first thing would be to try and get the rest of you guys to sort of sign up to it. And again, it's a big part of our BSIP. Like I said, we can use some BSIP funds to encourage people to make that shift. So coming on to the projects that are now in the delivery phase, so a couple to mention on here. One of them, we know contactless payment is going to be a huge part of our future. It's already well used. So National Express have got 1 day, 3 day and 1 week capping when you use a bank card. The other operators accept bank cards. A capping is available. The tram operator accepts bank cards, but you can't use your card across them all and achieve a best value cap. So if you are using your bank card across operators, you've probably been overcharged, which is horrendous. We need to sort of address that. We set out a design that sorts that out. We've asked government for about the last 2 years for funding for it. They've turned us down. We're looking to use Crust's funding to get that moving ultimately. And we've been reviewing the technology, the business case, etc., to get that into place. That if we get the go ahead for our Crust funding to do this, we can go live with the procurement. And again, the feedback we've had so far is it's still the right design. The business case is still there, so that's been positive. The other one we're moving on to is rail. So rail's been a huge gap in the Swift offer, mainly because the hardware hasn't been there for us to use that. We're in the process of getting accreditation for all of our retail touch points so that we can sell rail tickets, which will be a good step forward. As part of that, to get your accreditation, you have to be able to sell every ticket. So we'll be able to sell tickets, going well beyond our area as well, which is good in terms of being able to bring in commission. So projects that we're finalising planning before delivery. There's still a little bit of work to do on Swift Go, so we've got to introduce a solution for children, which we're well along the way towards doing, and rolling out further top-up locations. So the 1,000 pay zone outlets where you can get other types of Swift tickets, they're going through an evolution of the technology that will allow that should be in place before the end of the financial year. A big area that we're looking at is now mobility as a service. So how do we expand on our apps and everything else so we can bring in other modes of transport that we've just rolled out? We've done a little bit of this. So if you look at the Swift app, you can see in real time live docking for cycles. And again, you can hire that, but you have to go out of the Swift app into the Beryl app. This is all about bringing everything into one app, so you can book, you can pay across all of mobility. So our part of that is to build all those back end features that allow it, and equally it brings all of Swift to potential others as well. So you can use Swift Payment, Swift Banking, the account management, etc. if you were in an alternative app, obviously securely, but it really opens up the solution that we can offer in the West Midlands. So now onto some of the conceptual stuff that's sort of just before that planning stage. So we're really keen to deliver Swift Go on rail. So you get the capping on rail. We know what we need to do our end to do that, but to do it, we need DFT support, and we also need the rail delivery group to support us, and we are working with them on that. So we need information from them, and we need to pass information back so we can understand best values and start to charge customers. That, like I say, we've got a board that's set up to do that, the DFT attend and RDG attend, which is looking really positive. We'll be the first to do it outside of London. It's also depending on the hardware rollout. So at the moment, there are 6 stations in the West Midlands with hardware that allows a Swift transaction. West Midlands Trains are in the process of rolling out hardware now across the rest of the network. Latest update is that will be October 2022 when that's ready. By that time, all of the Swift retail systems will be accredited. If we can get Swift Go onto it as well, it will mean we'll have a system that is comparable with London. So huge opportunity within that, but plenty of work still to do. The contactless payment bit, so like I said, the work we're doing at the moment is more in the business case and testing the technology. We want to be able to go out to procure. We want to try and do that in early April if possible. We do know from 2 independent consultants that have worked with us, it will take 2 years to deliver. So it's never been delivered anywhere else in the world before. We've got some unique circumstances in the UK ultimately with this sort of stuff, but it will take 2 years to deliver. But we just want to get going. You know, the sooner we get going, the sooner we can deliver it. So coming on to some other stuff, as I said, there's quite a lot going on in this area at the moment. So I just wanted to give you the headline overview of what we've put forward for our BSIP in the ticketing space. So we want to continue with the 6% fares reduction that was introduced in July. So outside of London, the West Midlands has the cheapest fares, cheapest bus fares. We want to maintain that. It's an important part of getting people back onto the network. The multi-operator ticket has a premium of 5.1%. We want to remove that. That's the first step. So remove the premium. So it's just as cheap to travel on all services as it is to travel on one operator's service. And then we want to do a radical simplification of the fare structure. So if you remove the premium from the N-bus ticket, why would you have any other ticket? So we're hoping that we can take about 3,000 ticket options, which is unmanageable, down to about 6. So for the very first time, we'll be able to put prices at bus stops, you know, really get that message out there, what the price is, which we know is a huge barrier at the moment with the complexity that we have. But to do it, we're going to have to introduce controlled pricing mechanisms. So if there was only one ticket set, you know, essentially you could get some rogue operators encouraging cartel type pricing. So we need to be in control of pricing. And what we're proposing is inflation -1. So in real time, in sort of real sense, fares will come down every year. And what that should do is stimulate innovation with operators to make sure that they're, you know, continuously pushing at costs. Also aligning ticket retail and marketing. We still compete really with National Express for ticket sales and stuff, which is quite hard given that we work really closely in partnership. So let's formalise a real alignment so we can optimise what we do and make it as efficient as possible. And again, I've talked about delivering the contactless payment, which is a huge gap in our network at the moment. So it's another exciting one we're looking to do. The other really interesting thing that's happened is National Express have closed their travel shops. So I thought it worthy of putting an update here, what we've done. They've sort of gone through a process where they've rolled out a new solution. So it's not all bad news. I'm not sure if we really wanted them to close them down. It's not all bad news. They've opened, they've set up a relationship with Payzone. So they now have 1,000 shops out in the West Midlands where you can buy their ticket. So that's much bigger than it was before. They've also done a huge shift to digital channels. So the case to keep those physical shops open that were quite expensive for them, I suppose, is smaller. And they essentially shut them down in October 2021. We've done loads of work with them, some really good work from the teams here. So we did a gap analysis to understand what the major issues would be, and the ones that we were focused on was those who were digitally excluded or rely on cash. What we can see though, if you're digitally excluded and rely on cash, you will have a corner shop now through Payzone that will allow you to get your ticket. So not necessarily as big an issue as it might well have been. We've done some significant work, as National Express, to train the Payzone outlets. So we've done retraining programs. So they've been eager for customers to go in to buy the tickets from their closure. Lots of pre-closure information. We had people outside the travel shops handing out leaflets, etc., with information weeks before. So when you went in to buy your ticket the month before, you were informed these shops were closing. We also undertook a survey, and again, trying to identify what those problems were. So what we've done post-closure, so as I said, we've had people outside of shops. So if you went back, even though you would have, the month before you would have been told the closing, if you would have went back, you would have had someone to tell you where the nearest Payzone outlet is, flyers, etc. A big campaign on digital marketing to push this as well. And the final thing we've done at this stage, we will do more, is we're doing a data insight analysis based on Swift data to understand the impact of that change. And then when we get into the depth of the data coming back, we'll be able to put forward more mitigation measures if there are any. So sorry to sort of go through that in a little bit of a whirlwind. There's quite a lot going on here. But if I pass back to the chair and then perhaps open up for questions.
Yes, any comments?
Yes, please, Chair.
I did see your hand, yes. Yes, Bob.
Thank you, Kath. Matt, I really appreciated the report, thank you. And I wanted to make you aware that as you're encouraging people to get on board the Swift app, that recently Solihull have re-tendered their car parks contract. So now Solihull is in a much better position to move to Swift. Can I ask that you please contact Paul Tovey, head of our Highways Department, to further this conversation? I'm happy to be included in any correspondence that you want to make. Thank you.
That's great. So yeah, we've actually been in conversation with Paul from Solihull, and we were aware of the tender that he was doing. So you've just nudged me. This is the right time now to get in touch. So I'm really grateful for that. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Any other contributions, Pervez?
Yeah. Matthew, thank you for your report, and I hear what you said. So I went to Port Meadow bus station, and I'm grateful to Transport for West Midland officers were there, and they were doing a fantastic job. But National Express told us, because not many people are going to these travel shops and it's not viable commercially, and they closed it. And so when I was there were queues of people. And when I asked officers, what's the response? And they said they are working non-stop. There were two officers, and Swift machine was broken. So they couldn't get any pass. And people were, believe me, very confused customers were. They're coming in again, a lot of people were coming in. So I don't buy this, and I would urge Pete and other colleagues, officers, that please, we need a data from those officers who are there at the bus stations, that we can make a decision, and we should put a case to National Express vigorously and with tenacity. That is not acceptable when the government first time is investing so much money into buses, and we want people out of cars into buses so we can tackle our pollution and congestion. And the whole purpose and vision of Swift is, and BSIP is, to get people into buses and provide services to these people. And for, the first thing we done is close all the travel centers. And so don't forget, it is fine to have, a lot of people do have, internet and mobiles, but 35% people in West Midlands don't have these facilities. accessibility is not only just wheelchair, it is, also digital accessibility, and people don't have it. And very people who use buses, don't forget that they are just about managing. They're not even managing, to be quite honest, and they're relying on public transport, and especially our senior citizens and the young people, and they were very, very confused. They were shocked. I was there with them 45 minutes, and there were a lot of people coming in and asking information about all sort of things. So, I mean, fine, what you're saying is, acceptable, but I think National Express, with regret, I say they were economical with truth when they said people are not using those travel centers. I was there, believe me, and I asked those Transport for West Midland officers. I don't want to get them into trouble, but they were also agreeing that there are a lot of people coming here. And I would urge officers that please, I feel, and I think some of my colleagues, that Transport for West Midland officers haven't put the case to National Express vigorously, that we cannot accept when the government is emphasizing in BSEP that information and data is crucial, and providing information to passengers crucial, and to bring them into public transport. Why have we closed these centers down? Why? It's not acceptable.
So just come back on some of that. Some of this is very difficult, isn't it? Some of this is obviously really difficult. And I'll get the guys to look at Coventry Pool Meadow in particular. And it sounds like the Swift vending machine not working was part of that problem, which I know it's working now, and we'll make sure they are more robust. And in fact, we are looking to roll out more vending machines. The reason why some of this is difficult is, I think the shops are reasonably well used, but they've been declining use. So there's a whole host of other channels now. There's digital channels, there's PayZone. So actually, as of today, accessibility to your fare is probably greater than it has ever been. There's a bit of an information piece though, just to make sure that customers are connected with that. So all of those people that turned up to Pool Meadow, absolutely they've had a problem. We need to make sure that they get the message gets through to them. They now have a corner shop that's closer to them, more likely than Pool Meadow, to access their ticket. So it's a bit of a pain point, because the other thing in this, and like I said, so if I come back to some of those basic principles, generally our operators are accepting of the point we've said to them. What if we limit fares increases to inflation -1? What if we to do that? That'd be revolutionary. Nowhere else is doing that. But to enable them to do that, where you can take a cost out, you've got to look at that in a sort of in a data-led, intelligent way, and potentially not stop it, if you see what I mean. So this is a really difficult one, because if those shops were open, those customers wouldn't have been impacted. But I think in the sort of short to medium term, the mitigations we've put in will mean they will find a way of getting a ticket that's probably easier and better than they have at the moment. If the operators can make a saving from it and that can be reinvested in lower fares, I think we're winning. But this isn't easy, is it? This isn't easy.
Thank you, Chair. Just to supplement the information that Matt's provided there, I think as well, it's also worth saying, I mean, there's a difference between level of footfall and the volume of sales and therefore profit. And of course, these were commercial premises operated by National Express as part of a wider network. Now, in actual fact, we have been in dialogue with National Express. I think if we had had a longer lead time to the closures, then I think the situation on the ground, I think what we have done is try to implement everything we can within the time we have available, i.e. deploy people to support those sort of mitigations. But if we'd have had a longer lead time, I think we'd have made sure that those points that Matt refers to there, more vending machines, more comprehensive information to ensure that you have covered like for like the services and products that people were accessing before. And of course, what we did do was redeploy members of our own team, TFWM staff, across to those bus stations to support it. National Express put in a temporary position, so they have some staff supporting our staff over the first couple of weeks. But the situation in terms of timing, I don't think, if I'm honest, wasn't necessarily ideal. But of course, that has all been driven by the fact that whilst government are supporting funding for bus services, there have been changes to those bus service funding arrangements at the beginning of September. So from the start of September, whereas prior to under the old COVID bus service support grant, those operators were being funded to support those activities in the round. As of the bus recovery grant coming into play at the beginning of September, then there was a removal of any support from government for those additional activities. Therefore, they became a commercial activity again on that day, and hence we saw those changes taking place by National Express. And we've worked as fast as we can, hard as we can, to deliver those mitigations in the time that we've got. But I think we would all share that in an ideal world, if we would have had a longer period to address that, then those measures would have been more robust in the time that we had. That's not going to stop us from working towards the robust solution, though, in the coming months, to make sure that rollout of further vending, further information, and that customers are supported right across those channels, including better information to customers where else they can access that. But we intend to keep our staff in place, and we intend our staff to be supporting in terms of those ticketing types, customer information, and guiding people to the best information and the best selective offer for them. That will not stop with this at all.
Any further questions, comments on Matt's report? Right, well done, Matt. You always have lots of news for us in your ticketing work, and hopefully, I suppose after the next year or so, you'll be able to start providing us with an annual comparison of ticket prices, or certainly bus ticket pricing in the various regions, so we can see just where we are. But it looks as if with the 6% arrangements, we should surely be at the bottom, the lowest, cheapest slot, rather than just in the bottom, like 15 to 20%. So thank you. I look forward to that and hearing about further progress. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Now, Pete, do you have an up-to-date, up-to-the-minute COVID recovery update for us? That's item 11.
Chair, thank you. A short update, verbal update again, if I may, on the COVID recovery, as we've talked about previously in this forum on the recovery channels. Just thought it worth providing a brief overview for members around some of the key metrics and activities that we have been seeing across the region on the public transport and highways network. So in terms of buses, first of all, we have seen some of the patronage levels for buses recover to around between 75 and 80% of pre-COVID levels over recent days and weeks. Obviously, the weekend just past actually has been the highest weekend, with up to 81% of pre-COVID patronage levels, the highest yet we've seen, which could obviously be impacted slightly by the disruption that we've spoken about previously. There have also infrastructure and operating effectively across all of the bus stations and interchanges and across the stops and shelters. We've heard today there have been some challenges around operations with bus services linked to some driver sickness and driver recruitment, which the bus operators, along with ourselves, have been working hard to address. This is something that we have been working closely with, particularly the main providers over recent weeks, but looking and identifying further actions that can be undertaken, not least actions with the Department for Transport and the DVSA, and that's been trying to speed up the time taken to process licences and get people into the training area. Mobilisation of a skills programme to attract new drivers and training, which the WMCA has been leading through TFWM with the bus operators as well. And the operators themselves have been increasing their own pay rates for drivers and looking at incentives to retain staff, including shorter shift patterns and in incentives and in the form of bonuses. So there's been a lot of work undertaken there around the network. What we have seen is some short notice cancellations, and our focus has been on how we try to make sure the customer information and provision there also is right, as well as addressing the root cause and keeping those moving. Similarly, in the rail recovery, we've seen 65% of passengers so far return to the rail network. And again, the rail network is working, the rail operators are working hard to try and recover that further. But there have indeed been occasions over the past couple of weeks where there have been some short notice cancellations there, and information, ensuring customer information is provided up to date. As well. We've heard a lot about Metro today, so I won't reiterate that. We have seen that use on the highways network has continued to increase the traffic levels and traffic volumes, specifically in some areas, and that has led to some increasing challenges around congestion. And there's a lot of work going on through the RTCC, working with the local authorities to look at what can be undertaken there. I think the final point, just in the interest of time, that I will highlight is that we have spoken today around a couple of elements of funding, and all of our bus services that currently operate are supported through something now called the grant that I just referred to since the beginning of September is the Bus Recovery Grant provided by government, and that is scheduled to operate through to the end of March 2022. Now, at the moment, as we sit here today, we don't have any commitment from government beyond that date for funding for bus services. The DFT have informed us that that is a matter that Treasury are now prepared to discuss and engage on, and discussions have now commenced between bus operators and government as well. The reason I'm highlighting that here today is this is also a critical matter as we look at financial monitoring within the Transport Delivery Committee. There is a risk around impacts as of March, April 2022. We hope that the BSIP submission that we've made to government, which also sets that out very clearly to government, we have a risk to the delivery of bus services. But if you look at the financial subsidy that our bus services are requiring in this current year that we are in, and then project it onto 2022-23, there is probably still a shortfall of some £30 million plus, which is no insignificant undertaking when it comes to the level and potential impacts that could have to bus services. So that's the scale and the importance of the discussion with the Department of Transport, and currently sits as one of the combined authorities' top financial risks for the next financial year of 2022-23. So even though the financial monitoring report that we review, Chair, looks at this current financial year, you may want to think about whether coming towards the future meetings, we just have a bit of a draw into that, a bit of an update on what the current risk profile is and how we are working collectively to mitigate that with government.
Thank you. It'd be very interesting to see how local rail delivers in replacing Metro for the journeys, because the West Midlands Rail Board is having a special meeting to deal with the disappointments at Snow Hill. So they will certainly have to pull their socks up if they're going to be offer us the sort of assistance and support that we need. What do you think? Richard and I will be attending as observers, but we ought to be aware of that. Right, okay, any questions on that? Oh, thank you. Now, I wonder whether item 12 should be a private report, because it's a combined authority report, and it's about CPOs and so on.
Chair, it is a private.
It will be a private report, but we'll have to ask Albert to leave for that. But first, let's look at item 13, report back from the member engagement groups. I know that Richard has been suggesting that anyone who wishes to see the action notes, the actual not minutes, but the notes of the meetings rather than the short summary, should be able to access those action notes so they can see what actions were arising from the mates. Tim.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got to go in a second, but I support that. The suggestion from my group also came that we should put who actually attended,
Attendance, yeah.
Attendance at the negs as well in the report, so that it's open and transparent.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Other lead members are invited to attend as well if they see any cross-cutting issues on the agenda. But I think there may just be one or two gaps still of some people not being invited or being made aware of them. So that those gaps need to be plugged, really, because we're well into the year now since we decided on this. This is the lead members, the portfolio holder lead members that I'm referring to, who might want to drop in on someone else's meg as well as their own. Yes, I mean, that's fully understood. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, can I just mention one point on there, please? As part of the putting passengers first one, I have had several visits to establishments in the borough of Dudley to get the views of the ring and ride users. And to say the least, they haven't been very complimentary. It does give me some concern. I think it's an issue we really do need to look at and speak to some of the users or people what would use the service if they were able to, or the sort of treatment they are actually receiving from ring and ride. One lady I spoke to said she'd never use it again. She said, because I went to Maryhill, they left me there, she had to have a taxi to take me back home, they didn't pick me up. So they should have, sort of thing, I won't use the savoury words that describe the service, because it'd be unfair for me to do that in this room. But there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the service users on the type of service they are actually receiving.
I think you need to use the members' inquiries line to make a formal complaint about it and ask for it to be investigated. But I've been out, not for the last 2 or 3 years or more, I have actually been out on ring and ride trips with users in better times, pre-pandemic and so on. But you could do that too, you could make arrangements to do that.
Madam Chairman, with all due respect, the point I was trying to raise here is the service users. The service users I actually visited are physically disabled and have learning difficulties, I think is a polite way of putting things. Some of them were very concerned about the treatment they'd received, and I was very disturbed to listen to some of the things they're actually telling me. Now, the manager of the centre was actually present, and he actually confirmed that they had been back to him previously and raised these issues.
Right, well, you need to make that formal complaint, David. There's nothing I can actually physically or actively do to your concerns. I saw a pretty full ring and ride bus on my way to this meeting this morning, which was a delight, really, to see.
Chair, if I may, I think on Councillor Stanley's points, first thing I will do is flag that specific concern to Stephen Holloway and ask him to follow up with yourself directly, Councillor Stanley. I think given the information you've given us today, it'd be great actually if we can make sure that we provide you with the information for those customers to be able to also lodge any further concerns direct. We're also trying to re-engage on the user groups, so we've got the different forums across the region and Stephen's now leading on setting those up. But if we are having this kind of approach that where customers are experiencing that, we now have the customer contact centre for Ring and Ride in-house. That's helped. There have been some issues we know with driver establishments there as well that we've been working through with the operator to provide. But also we are really keen to make sure that we use the customer feedback to address that. So anything we can do to help support members. And the other thing, Chair, from a TDC member perspective, I think now might be the time as well for us to consider on the forward plan whether we have an adequate representation of Ring and Ride activity coming into this group, because what used to happen under the days of ATG was they would provide separately to their own board, and also they would occasionally come into here. So I think now we can perhaps provide some more of that transparency and scrutiny through this forum by a report coming through to the forefront.
I know when ATG first began pre-pandemic, we were going to be, as TDC members, involved in a passenger panel, in actually attending it and working with Ring and Ride passengers to deal with, well, I should say, some of this situation that David has described. Not been possible. Unfortunately, it's one of our great plans that have been put on the back burner, along with relaunching the Metro passenger panel, which was just on the brink, just before the pandemic began. So that's another thing. It was going to be one of our responsibilities, if you like, means of input with liaising with passengers of that particular service.
Madam Chairman, if I could just add, I probably wouldn't have raised this today if we'd been in the situation referring back to the days of Mr. Birmingham, what run the service for us some time ago. I would just go on the phone, tell him what had happened, you get someone down there, interview the people concerned, listen to the concerns and actually look into it. That's how I dealt with things like this when they happened before, but nothing quite so bad as what I've had in the last fortnight.
Well, I think we need to get hold of that as the customer service lead on this, provider. Pervez?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, in Coventry we having similar problems. So please, I mean, I understand you saying in the future we will discuss this. Is it possible you can send us a note that yes, we have in-house, as far as the telephone booking is concerned, but there are issues with the booking also. So if we can have some information that I'm having a meeting with various people, so we can say to them, please, this is the procedure, this is the situation. So they can, if they have issues, then we can pass on. So if you can send us information, yes, it's National Express, but as far as booking is concerned, it's in-house in Transport West Midlands. And relevant officers who are in charge of it, so if they do have problems, they can directly contact them. You said Steve Holloway.
We've done this quite recently. I've certainly sent something out to all Birmingham members in recent months when ATG started to revive, as things seem to get better, what numbers to ring, what to do. And I feel sure it went out to everybody else, urging you to circulate it to members in your districts.
Chair, more than happy to review, update and share with all members based on what.
Particularly as we come up to Christmas, because groups may well be organising group outings. I know there's this balance to be struck between the one or two person outing trip and the larger one. Yes, so we have that perhaps for us all to put out to people in all the counties in our districts in case their constituents mention it. My experience tells me I do this, and then perhaps even 3 days later I get an inquiry because somebody hasn't read what I've sent out. Okay, as always, as in any organisation. Okay, right. Let's move on then. Oh, Chairman, sorry.
Okay, I'm supposed to make a verbal report of the air quality congestion and environmental impact MAG, which met on Friday, 12th of November. And at our MAG, we had a 4-monthly update table on progress of transport for West Midlands transport actions to improve air quality. This includes the recent city regions Sustainable Transport Settlement Award of the to the West Midlands of £1.5 million for the next 5 years. And that since April 2019, over 950 buses in the West Midlands fleet have been modified to Euro 6 through effective partnership working with the DWFM and the bus operators. This is nearly half of the 2,100 bus fleet. Then we consider a PTAG report, now called the Urban Transport Group, with a toolkit of short, medium and longer term transport measures that can be taken to improve air quality. There are 3 categories in the approach: reduce, sift and improve. TWFM measures being taken at the moment are mainly in the sift and improve categories. This is by delivery of sustainable transport schemes to shift use from car to public transport, cycling, walking, and improvement to vehicles, with improvement to bus vehicles and electric charging points strategy work.
Then we had operated on the arrangement for technical visit to Tiley Energy Park on the 24th of November, to which all the TDC members are invited. Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Just on the Rail and Metro member engagement group, to let you know that the next meeting's on the 20th of December, and interestingly, it is scheduled to be the Wednesbury Metro Depot. So subject to accommodation being available for more people than just members of the MEG, then there would likely be an invitation to you, and I think that would be a good occasion to catch up on a few things. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we'll leave it open, yeah.
We won't want to get in their way and prevent them from sorting these trams out, but it would be interesting to see just what it is. Have a look at one of these cracks for ourselves. There we are. Thank you. Can we now move on to the combined authority report, really just for thoughts on it. For rail package 1, it's to do with the Willenhall Darlaston line stations.